Hi, I'm Gavin,
And I'm Ryan.
and welcome back to the S.O.U.N.D Project. I wanted to take a moment to talk about one of my favorite projects ever.
Yeah.
I've told multiple people that this project is the most meaningful thing that I feel like I've been a part of in my whole career.
Yeah.
And you'll also notice that I'm wearing a hoodie instead of my normal Haverstick Designs shirt. This is a hoodie from Studio 33.3, which is a studio up at Grand Rapids First, which is a church in near Grand Rapids, Michigan. And about, almost 3 years ago, James Good from Vintage King gave me a call. And he mentioned that there was this project that he needs an acoustical consultant for, and he started talking more and more about it. And I immediately just knew that I wanted to be involved in some way. And it's a very moving story that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Like it's, every project's meaningful for us, but this one was something else because come to find out that at the church, Sarah Reifkogel was the worship leader there. She's the pastor's daughter, and she got diagnosed with cancer and passed away young, like at age of 27.
Yep.
And just an amazing talent. Just when you see her perform, you're just like blown away with the amount of talent and passion that she had for what she did. And when she got diagnosed, they started a foundation in her name in order to carry on the legacy that she had of just raising up other worship leaders.
Yep.
Like her whole goal was that the younger generation would know God and worship Him. And they wanted to build this studio inside the church, so it was a place that people could come and record anything that they would like to put out there in the world to worship God.
Yep.
And I remember traveling up there with Oscar, one of the first trips, and it was just a very emotional time. We sat around a conference room table with Pastor Sam and Pastor Brenda, who is Sarah's parents, also Pastor Drew McElhaney, who was heavily involved throughout the whole project, who's the worship leader now at the church and had led worship with Sarah for many years. And I remember Pastor Sam and Pastor Brenda talking to us about their daughter and how amazing she was, and how this project was very special to be able to honor her legacy. And I remember they prayed over us. They ended up asking if they could share a video of her performing, and I was just crying and just a mess. It's like, and I think about how like blessed I am to be able to do what I get to do for a living. And like I said, every project means a ton to me, but this one in particular, I was just like, I want it to be the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire process, it was just so meaningful to know that every decision that was being made was, to me, it was of dire importance, because it's like, I want this end result to be just an amazing tribute to Sarah. So that's the backstory.
Yeah.
And want to go a little bit into some of the details of the project. Studio 33.3, by the way, is it's named that because Sarah's life verse was Psalm 33:3.
Yep.
And sing a joyful song to the Lord. And there's also worked into the logo of their studio was the ellipsis, which means a lot to their family, because Sarah had gotten a tattoo of an ellipsis on her wrist. And when she got diagnosed with cancer, it meant even more to her, because it was like her story will live on. Like, it's not, this isn't the end. And
That's something that you even talked about, like when you guys had that initial on-site, like weren't there a bunch of people like around the table that also had that same tattoo then too?
I kept looking around and I saw a lot of the people on staff and like family members, like they have that tattoo as well. Yeah. And so that's heavy. That's a lot of stuff right there, but I want to kind of go into a little bit of the process of the studio. When I went up there for the first time, the church is located in what I believe was a school building at one point. And they had this extra space, which was a science lab. And so what you're seeing here is what I witnessed the first time that I went up there. It's just a science lab with some different stations for people to do experiments. But one thing that I saw in this that I was really happy about was there were not a lot of columns in the way. And we also had a really tall ceiling height to work with. And so that got me excited for the possibilities of what it could become. There's me looking up on the ladder. They're checking out what's above there and how much additional space was going to be available to us once we took out the drop tile. And it's just, this was the space that we were given. And originally, when we were doing some layouts for the studio, we were told everything had to fit within that space, and so these are a couple of the early on layouts that we were looking at. And so some of the things that they wanted was a control room, a live room, a couple ISO booths, and then also a lounge and kitchenette. The other thing that we needed to retain, at least early on in the process, was a storage space for a gathering area that was next to the studio for them to be able to store chairs and other things like that. So you see that in the upper left-hand corner of both of these designs. Needed a bathroom as well, and then some storage for musical equipment, some different things like that. So started doing some different layouts, and there's a lot of these. We then experimented with the control room going north-south instead of east-west like the first two designs. But everything felt like it was being kind of shoehorned in, right? You can see here's another option where we made the live room much larger, kind of more so what it is today. But after we kept doing these different layouts, we realized that, man, it'd be great to have more space to, like, if the lounge, everything that we did, it always felt like the lounge was just this like kind of oddly shaped, not really super functional type of space. So eventually, people at the church told us, like, hey, there's this space next to the studio. We could cut a hole through the concrete wall and be able to put a lobby and a lounge on that side. And that was a huge relief because, one, we were able to make the lobby and the lounge and everything so much more comfortable because it was larger. But then also it just freed up this entire space on the left-hand side of this drawing, freed up that space for only studio. And so this was getting close to the final. This is the final layout here, where one thing we need to do is isolate the space really well so that outside noises didn't disturb recordings and they didn't disturb other people in the church. So we end up floating the floors. So you see a ramp in the lounge over here to be able to ramp up from concrete level up to the floated floor level of the studio. We also added in a couple amp booths instead. This drawing is actually not the final drawing because we ended up taking out these doors here, and you actually access the ISO2 over from ISO.1. But we got sliding glass doors that act as windows and also pass-throughs to go into this ISO.1, which is primarily a piano room, but could be used for drums, could be used for lots of different things. And then you have the really large live room. So really pleased with how it all came about. I actually have very little construction photos. I need to get them from Drew. But he would sometimes text things to me or things like that. But this is some of the live room being framed in. You can also see a couple windows that we retained in that space so we could have natural light. But just really tall ceiling heights. I think that the peak is around 18 to 19 feet tall in there, and just makes for a really, really nice sounding live room. When I went up there to do some testing, I went up there with Nate, and we did some testing. They actually didn't have doors yet, so this is a picture of them boarding up the door so that I could get a decent reading with my tests. This is in the control room looking back into the live room area. And we just had some temporary speakers that we were popping in there to be able to measure how the room was performing. But this is actually before we went up for the grand opening, this was the last state that I saw the room in.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild, because when you see what it turned into, it's quite the shock. Here's the back of the control room. Again, there's the door to the lobby on the right, and then the ISO booths are over there to the left. You can see some of the floated floor and some of the channels that were cut, where the producer desk is and where the console ended up being. And then this is, during that test, this is what the live room state was. First layer we put up was plywood to be able to, hang things off of it easily, but that's kind of a trick we use a lot.
Yeah.
But one thing that was really cool, you can see a little bit down here in the bottom of the photo, is that a lot of the people from the church wrote things on the walls. So they wrote on the plywood before the final drywall would come on, and it was really neat to see that. And then Pastor Drew asked if I would sign it.
Yeah.
So I do have a picture of my signature there on the wall. And that was a really meaningful thing to me, because it's just like, this will always be right behind the drywall here in the live room. So that was the testing that we did. And then we ended up being able to go up for the grand opening.
Yeah.
And that was, like when I say this is the most meaningful project, I also say that day was probably the most meaningful day I've ever had, like in a work setting ever. And it ranks way up there on the personal side as well.
Yep.
They had the grand opening on November 1st, 2024, and that would have been Sarah's 30th birthday.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing, the timing of everything. Like we talked about it, like, so we brought up not just myself, but you and Juan, George, Paige, Luke came up as well, to actually film the whole thing. And we do a lot of videos on this channel.
Yeah.
But if people could just see that video, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
Like it's the most special thing that I think that we have done. So we actually, I kind of have a thing with numbers. We've talked about this before.
Yep.
My number, or the time that typically pops up in my life, has been 8:04.
Right.
And it's been a thing that my family and friends, they all know about it. Like major things have happened to me, and I look at the clock and it's 8:04, and it's happened like that for over 15 years.
Right.
And I always thought it was kind of like an ominous thing. I always thought like, oh, well, I had a flight that left at 8:04 one time, and I'm like, I don't want to get on that flight.
Right.
Like bad's gonna happen. But when my son was born, my first child, we arrived at the hospital. I look at the clock; it's 8:04 when we pull into the parking lot. We were on the 4th floor, room 8, and the doula asked me, like, how much do you think he's going to weigh? And I said 8 pounds 4 ounces on the dot.
Yeah.
And sure enough, 8 pounds 4 ounces exactly. And so I've always had this thing with numbers and number 8:04, and Sarah and her family always had the thing with 3:33. Like things happened to them at that time, which happened to be her life verse of 33:3, kind of showing up in their lives. And we arrived. I mean, we stopped for lunch, we stopped for breaks or whatever, and it's about like 3.5, 4 hour drive maybe. Yep. And then we pull in the parking lot and we looked at the clock and it's 3:33. Yeah. And gave us the perfect amount of time, because the public tour started at 4:30, and so we were able to get a private tour with Pastor Sam and Pastor Brenda, just showing us around the studio, and it was just an amazing time to be able to see like all of this hard work, because from the start to finish it was about 2 years 9 months, and just to see it in person, all the hard work that went into it, from contractors and architects and interior treatment installers and everybody that made this thing happen was just really special. And we actually, like I said, we filmed this whole day. Like I had a microphone on for 5 hours that day, and every conversation was captured. And Luke was able to document all these really special moments and put together this video that is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the studio here, I have a few photos of it. You can see more of it in the actual tour, but it's really neat how some of the previous studios we've done influenced the aesthetics of this place. Like they really liked the Crowder studio that we had done, and also the Brooklyn Duo, kind of the all white color. And I just thought it was perfect too, because like honestly, stepping into this place, it felt like you're stepping into heaven. Like it was just the way it glows, the way it just feels. It's pretty amazing. And we worked into the design some different things, like the ellipsis of the 3 dots. Like you don't see it in this photo of the control room, but the ceiling lights are these 3 big circles. And then it also shows up in the live room as well. You can see a little bit in the upper right hand corner of this image. And just everything about this place just felt right. Like sometimes you walk into a room and you're just like, I don't know how much I like this or that. It's like everything was in its right place. And just kind of showing, there's a piano room that's just off of the control room. We've got, you can see through it into the ISO booth with the 2 amp rooms. I think that's the next picture here. They have a couple of amp rooms with shelves to be able to put multiple amps in there. Also got the nice comfy lounge, and that has a lot of touches that's from Sarah in that room.
Yeah, all those photos in there, like they talked about it being like photos that they pulled from her phone, like after she passed away and stuff. So there's a lot of things where it's just like, this is very much like what Sarah's vibe would have been, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, it was really, really special. There's just some more of the kitchenette area. Her dog Moses, a little illustration that was done of him there. And so we're going to do a proper studio tour of that space. But like I said, I just want everyone to watch this thing. This video that was the documenting the grand opening. And it's just 14 minutes long. I know that sometimes in YouTube land that's a long time, but I promise it's worth it. I've watched it 9 times, and I've cried 9 times watching it.
Literally everyone that I've shown it to has started like either full on crying or at least tearing up while watching it. So it's really powerful.
Yeah, really well done, and just it's cool because it's a reminder of like. Sometimes you get busy with projects and there's all these demands put on us, and it's like, it's just a great reminder of like what actually comes from what we do sometimes, and the amount of people that it is going to affect, and how this place, it's just getting started. It's like it took a long time to get to a completed project, but now it's just going to be fun to see what comes out of it. So. So that day, this video, it shows the tour. It shows there was a dedication service where I actually had to get interviewed by Pastor Sam, and I was really nervous about that, but was able to make it through. And so I'm really excited to do the full studio tour and show you guys more of the space itself. But I just kind of wanted to point out, this project in particular, just because it just meant so much to me.
Yeah. And that was something like, I mean, at least for me personally, like I came, 9 months, I think, after it already started.
Right.
But still like being able to like kind of hear about it as it was being built, and then like being able to go for the grand opening it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So go watch that video.
Yeah.
It's a really good one. And I think that you'll enjoy it. And just excited to share it with you guys. So that's been another episode of the S.O.U.N.D Project. Thanks for being a part of it, and we'll see you next week.